have been debating on posting this. Not because I have been scared, but simply because this is my first post since joining Reddit. Please forgive my writing, as sometimes my wording and punctuation could be better. I'll start off by explaining the area so you can get a good picture of where this occurred. We lived in a small neighborhood. All of the surrounding streets dead end into a half-circle park. Behind the park are some woods and a railroad track. When we were younger, we all played in the front part of the woods. We never ventured too far back. This was our play area for years. Never had an issue or scare. This area was a pretty and well-lit wooded area. Anyhow, one day my brother Jimmy, my best friend Sarah, and my brother's best friend Ian were all building a dam in the middle of this small creek that ran through the park and the woods. The boys decided they were going to head back to Ian's house for some snacks. Sarah and I said we would stay and finish our camp area. As we were moving rocks around, I get a very odd feeling come over me. A strange feeling that we are being watched. I immediately think it's the boys trying to scare us, and just continue with what we are doing. Sarah and I load up some big rocks and head back to the creek and put them at the dam. I get that feeling again as I stand up. I see something straight in front of me about 30 feet away. I can't clearly make out what it is yet because it is behind a bush, but I do see that it is a pattern of red and blue. I know that's nothing the boys had on, so at this point I am focusing, trying to figure out what it is. As I am scanning up the bush, I start to realize it is a clown. I shit you not. My heart started pounding immediately. The clown and my eyes lock. He is wearing a blue-red hat with a reverse pattern red-blue jumpsuit. I grab Sarah's shirt and immediately pull her upright, and she notices the man right away. He is smiling with a full face of makeup and has a huge knife. We both say nothing and start running as fast as our legs can take us. He begins to follow. We can hear twigs snapping and ground crunching, but we are booking it. We run through the front of the woods, through the side of the park, and up her dead-end street. Ian and Jimmy are 2 houses up from the end and see us running and are screaming, "What is going on?" While running past, we scream a clown and they start laughing. We are still running, screaming for our lives, and finally make it to the middle of the street where Sarah's dad, Danny, is now running out the front door because he hears us screaming. We meet Danny right at the beginning of the neighbor's house, and we were trying to explain what we saw, and he says, "Girls, stop it now. This is ridiculous. What are you talking about?" We try to catch our breath. By this time, Jimmy and Ian have caught up to us. We are crying and pointing and telling Danny again that we saw a clown and knife. Jimmy and Ian are laughing, and Danny is asking if they played a prank on us. About this time, an old yellow Pinto type of car comes from the dead end at the park and pulls right up next to the sidewalk of the yard we are in. Sure enough, plain as day, it's the fucking clown. No hat this time, but knife in hand and telling us to come here. Danny starts shoving us all toward the house, and he himself is scared and running now. The car drives off down the street. We get inside and Danny calls the police. We had to give statements and police patrolled the neighborhood and the park for a few weeks. We were never allowed to go in the park again, and a few months after that the city started to clear out the woods, cut down many trees, and made a walking area that you could see through all the way to the train tracks. My friend and I used to talk about this many times up until her death. No one would believe us had they not seen it as well. It was just so scary. I think they only got to see him because whoever it was had to go down the dead-end street to leave the neighborhood. Either way, this man was not afraid of us, nor the small group of people that gathered from our screaming. He very bravely stopped right in front of us as her father tried to comfort us and calm us down, all while flashing his knife. We were lucky to be alive, I feel. Had it just been one of us left in the woods, which sometimes occurred, I don't think there would have been a group of 4 of us any longer. Sarah's dad stopped drinking that day. We all have a fear of clowns.
This happened to me 6 years ago and will haunt me for the rest of my life. I grew up in one of the most densely populated neighborhoods in all of North America. The neighborhood was initially supposed to house 12,000 people, but by the time I was 12 years old, it had a population of around 30,000 people. It was one of Toronto's poorest neighborhoods, with the 50% of the population being under the poverty line, though the crime rate was not nearly as high as you'd expect it to be. The neighborhood was mostly made up of immigrants and refugees looking to find a better life, my family included. It was summer break between 5th and 6th grade, and my cousins, who happened to live in the same apartment complex, were at our place watching movies. I was getting hungry, so I grabbed some money and headed to the convenience store to get some snacks. It was around 7 p.m., so the sun was still up, and there was an hour and a half left of light. The convenience store was half a block away, so I walked it. When I got to the parking lot of the residential building the store was in, I noticed a man wearing a black hoodie with horizontal green stripes, standing in the corner of the parking lot. There was nothing too noticeable about the man, except that he was smoking directly under a no smoking sign. Nothing uncommon in that neighborhood, just kind of ironic. I walk up the steps and into the cramped convenience store. There might have been 7 people in there, but it looked as if it was already almost full, probably as big as a mid-sized apartment, and was already stocked up to the ceiling. Point is, if anyone enters, everyone in the store knows. So I come in, and directly to the left of the entrance is a shelf packed with many different types of candy. I was like any other child who has 20 different varieties of candy laid out in front of them, but only has the budget for 2, lost in thought. At the moment I forget about the man who was smoking, he enters through the door. He walks into the nook of the store behind me where they keep all of the flatbread. I can feel his gaze on the back of my head. I quickly decide on the snacks, pay, and leave. I walk out, down the steps, and to the sidewalk on the other side of the narrow parking lot when I hear the chimes of the exit door. I glance behind me to see who is exiting the store, and I am a shade under petrified when I see the man exit the store, especially when I notice he is carrying nothing in his hands. I quicken my pace just a tad and reason with myself that he just bought another pack of cigarettes and just put it in his pockets. That idea has barely crossed my mind by the time I am halfway back to my building. I turn around to see if he's still there. He is maybe 15 feet away from me when we make eye contact. He had his hood off, and I can see his face clearly. He looks to be Afghan. There were a lot of those in this neighborhood. It was a hot spot for refugees, and at the time, Afghanistan was doing really badly. He had scars covering his face and is balding on top. He couldn't have been too tall because he wasn't much taller than 6th grade me, so like 5'4" or 5'6". I spin back around and start to speed up, and I hear footsteps behind me quicken. By the time we got to the D-shaped driveway to my building, we were speed walking. Remember, it's broad daylight and there are many of people around, and a man chasing a kid is weird to anybody. As soon as we hit the split in the sidewalk, which separates the driveway and the straight path, I start sprinting at full speed to my building. Luckily, there was someone buzzing in at that exact moment, and I slipped in the door behind them. I quickly whirl around and pull the pneumatic glass door shut. When I look up, I see the man, seconds too late, on the other side of the glass. The look on his face still scares me. He stared at me with an expression of anger I had never seen before, nor have seen since. I run to the elevators and push the button. He starts rattling the door. The expression on his face was still sinister. When the elevator comes, he understands that he won't catch me. He leaves the way he became.
Back in 2011, I was 21 years old, fresh out of university and living in the capital of the Philippines, Manila, for some months. I interned at a peace-building NGO while also playing semi-professional football, soccer, in the country's national league. A strange combo, but both roles are relevant to the story. My experience starts one rainy Saturday afternoon in November. Football was canceled with a waterlogged pitch, but already downtown on my way to training, I decided to visit a fruit market listed in my Lonely Planet guide. This was pre-ubiquitous Google Maps days, at least in Manila. I must have looked lost as two Filipino women, one middle-aged, one early 20s, approached me from behind, raising their umbrella over my head and asking where I was headed. After some friendly chit-chat, it came to pass, without my prompting, that they had lived in the same neighborhood that I'm from in London, England. A strange coincidence, and one that lowered my guard. They offered to take me to a better fruit market, one that required a taxi to reach. Naive, trusting, and nervous about offending, I got in this taxi, leading me through the winding maze-like back streets of a Manila slum. We exit, and I'm utterly lost in an unfamiliar part of this sprawling city. Remember, this is pre-Google Maps and ride-sharing apps, leaving me at the mercy of these women. With no fruit market in sight, they plead with me to come into their nondescript, low-rise home for food and drink. My youthful naivety and reluctance to offend once again get the better of me. Whether due to trauma or time, I really can't remember what the inside of this place looked like, but I do remember it was dingy, had a TV with a karaoke hooked up, and there was a man waiting when we arrived. Realizing what a sketchy situation I was in, I was conscious of anything they gave me to drink, watching them open the beer bottles in front of me. A couple of drinks in, the karaoke was flowing. I felt physically fine, but deeply uncomfortable, vulnerable, and trapped, and was waiting for the opportunity to leave. A tray of barbecue meat was brought out, always associating drugging with drink, not food. I had very little concern over eating it. The naivety of this would become instantly apparent. Putting this pork into my mouth, it had a strange medicinal flavor, but it would be too late before I connected the dots. My final memory that day was the younger woman uncomfortably close to me, holding a microphone and flirtatiously singing the chorus of Hey Jude by the Beatles, while I drifted off, unable to keep my eyes open. I have virtually no memory of the next 24 hours of my life. I would wake up in a darkened room in the middle of the night, 1,000 kilometers south of Manila in a city called Davao. To be clear, this Davao trip was one that I had previously scheduled for work, leaving the day after this incident. Still, to this day, all I remember of the journey is waking up and seconds of sitting in a taxi on my way to the airport. I passed through customs, boarded a plane, collected my baggage, met my colleagues, and was driven to our work office/apartment, all with zero memory of doing any of this. My colleagues didn't suspect anything was wrong with me, mentioning later that I just seemed tired. It took some hours after waking up to piece together where I was and what had occurred. $200 had been withdrawn from my bank account, but I still had my wallet and phone. While I can't be certain, I concluded that I had been fed a drug popular in the Philippines called Antivan. I read similar stories of people being spiked, functioning relatively normally, becoming pliable, but having no memory of the incident. This would explain how I withdrew $200 while seemingly unconscious. To this day, I feel deeply uncomfortable at what may have occurred after I passed out, particularly with the behavior from the younger woman towards me just before I passed out. But those 24 hours of my life are gone, and I'll never know what happened. To the two women in Manila who drugged and robbed me, let's not meet.
So this happened about 10 or so years ago, when I was 16, but I was reminded of this earlier. It was summer when this happened, and because it was still quite hot at night, I slept with the bedroom window open. This night in particular, though, in the very early hours of the morning, probably around 1 or 2, I woke up feeling a bit cold, as a breeze had picked up. I'm usually a cold sleeper anyway, so it's not uncommon for me to start out the night with the window open, then wake up and shut it at some point. I got up out of bed and walked the short distance around my bed to the window. Moving the curtains aside, I leaned out and closed the window. However, I noticed a man standing almost directly under the street lamp at the end of our driveway, and he was looking at the house. I could have sworn he was looking straight at me. I freaked out, and, not knowing what to do, I got back in bed and huddled under the covers. I guess it was that thing of feeling safe in bed, as if nothing bad can happen. I told my parents in the morning, and while they were kind of worried, they didn't think much about it. My dad, though, did agree to keep watch that night. He had recently been laid off from his job, and so he had not much to do during the days, so he could afford to pull all-nighters. That night, every couple of hours, he'd go and check and look out the front of the house, but he had nothing to report the next morning. The man hadn't been there. A month or so passes and nothing strange happens, so it slips my mind completely. Again, though, we have another hot, sticky night, and again I wake up feeling a bit cold, so I go to close the window again. And there he is, standing under the street lamp, staring at the house. This time I go to my parents' room and wake them up, but by the time all three of us are looking out my bedroom window, there's nothing there, and the man is gone. 2 days later, I'm at my friend's house. She lives on the same street, a few houses down from mine. I mentioned this to her, and she said that her dad had seen the same thing. Her dad worked the night shift for a security firm, and some nights when he got home at 3, he would see a man standing on the street, staring at different houses. Usually, when someone noticed the man, he would disappear into the night, but my friend's dad would sometimes see him once every few weeks, just hanging around the street and staring at people's houses. In all honesty, I am not too sure what happened to that guy. I do know the police were notified, but as far as I know, according to my friend's dad, he stopped seeing the guy on the street a short while later. It gives me chills to think about this because quite literally anything could have happened. He could have been doing like a recon mission and trying to scope out the street and people's houses. He could have been a burglar or even a serial murderer. Just creepy. And from what I've read, standing outside people's houses in the dark and just staring is never a good thing.